Hello, everybody. This is Thomas Zachary with the newest episode of the KAAMP. Today, we have a really cool guest with you, somebody whose artistic talents I admire quite a bit. I've got some of his art hanging in my house. And without further ado, Sean, will you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Sean Williams, artist, illustrator, and graphic designer, I guess, technically, based out of Nashville. Um, yeah, I don't know what else much to say about myself. Let's get right into it and talk some art.
All right, dude. Well, what are you working on right now? We'll just skip to that real quick.
Well, there's actually some huge projects going on in my house. Not just art wise, but I'm building myself a new studio onto my house. So a lot of the bigger projects are kind of on hold right now until I can move stuff down there. But I have been working on a lot of little, small 6x9 pieces just to keep myself fresh, keep some things going. Um, that's been my big thing. Also designing some stickers and logos for some folks. Hopefully the new studio is going to be done within like the next day or two. So I'm really hoping by end of next week I'm in there and able to start working on those bigger pieces again.
Hey, that sounds like a good time. How long have you been working on that edition? I know you've been working on it for a minute.
Yeah, it's construction kind of sucks depending on weather and things like that. So the build has been going for about 2 weeks. I'm super thankful this time that I don't actually have to do the work myself like I do with most things in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the contractor's supposed to be finished either today or tomorrow. But like I said, it's been about 2 weeks now. But I'm adding a 26 foot by 18 foot room onto my house, which is pretty much going to be wood shop for building frames for my pieces and things like that, and general housekeep up. And then I'll have an art studio inside in the basement. And it's actually been a long time coming. I've been stuck in a corner of my dining room for about 5 years now, and
Oh
it's
yeah,
just
you've
getting.
earned this.
Yeah, it was great when I first started. Like I got a desk from an antique drawing desk from my wife's grandfather, and things were perfect. But now, I've started doing bigger pieces, so I'm starting to do like 18 by 24 canvases and watercolor, and there's all these you need room to store that stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
my walls are filled already because
Mm-hmm.
I've got all these other people's art up here. And so it just came a time where I was like, look, I can't progress anymore until until I get some space. So
So you had to make the space.
yeah, had to, it's either that or you just kind of suffocate yourself artistically by being crammed into this little corner. And it's just so hard to work when you've got all these things around you that you can't find a place for. And then you turn around, there are like stacks of dishes behind you, and you're like, oh yeah, I got to do that before the kids get home today. So having a place where you can just get away for 2 or 3 hours, and I have to say that having a place where you can leave things set up if you're in the middle of a project and just come back to it whenever you want to
Yeah,
is priceless.
it really is. I agree. My studio space at home is pretty small. It's like a 8 by 10 room, maybe a
Right.
little bigger. But I've got enough room for my desk in front of a window and shelving on both sides of the room, and an overflowing closet.
Yeah. I mean, you don't realize how much space all these little things like. I have two drawers filled with pencils and pens that I use a lot of them. Some are just backups waiting for me to go through the first batch, but all these things tend to add up, and the next thing you know, you look around, you're like, where did I get all this stuff?
It's somehow like I'm going to theorize that being a creative person generates some sort of magnetic field for art supplies. and you just end up accumulating things whether you like purposefully or intentionally acquire them or not.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know about you, but like I run to the art store for one thing and I come out with like a dozen. I'm like, dang it, I
I
really
can't.
didn't mean to spend that much money, but
I can't walk into Jerry's without buying another paintbrush. I don't know why.
right.
Like it's just one of
Man,
those
those
things that happens.
yeah, right, exactly. You know, so it like you said, it just accumulates.
I'm gonna stick with that theory until I'm proven explicitly wrong.
It's kind of like that the lost sock, you know, that
Mm-hmm.
you always tend to find. My
Mm-hmm.
wife has started like pinning her socks together when she washes them. I'm like, this is brilliant. Why didn't anybody teach me this when I was a kid? I could have saved so many socks, you know.
You might still have socks.
Yeah, I might actually have not had to buy socks for years at a time, you know.
Perhaps. So, so what are these bigger pieces of yours like, man? Let's talk about what kind of mediums do you like to play with.
Well, I started out obviously with like a lot of people, just pencil and pen, and that for a long time like was my thing. You know, I love those that shadow, that gradient that you can get with graphite and pen. Um, I started screen printing about 5 years ago after I graduated school. So I went back to school for commercial illustration. So that got me into the digital side, which then I was like, oh, I want to use this for screen printing. So screen printing is unfortunately been on hold for a little bit as my partner and I live uh, a ways apart. He lives down in Cookville, so it's a bit for me to get down there and work. Um, but we're working on that. So screen printing is definitely a big thing for me right now as far as learning and just figuring out how to do it, you know. Um, but come, well, I guess right at the start of lockdown, stuck in the house with, you know, two kids and a wife and nothing to go and do as far as selling my art.
Right.
So I figured it was time to pick up a new medium or at least try something that, you know, maybe something that was always difficult for me. So I decided to pick up watercolor, and that has been, man, it's been a savior for me because it really opened up a whole new world as far as color and everything else. You know,
That's one of those things I pick up when I want to frustrate myself. I have a decent handle on it for what I wish to achieve, but you know, when I really just want to like feel like I can't do anything, I pick up some watercolor.
yeah, it's for a long time I hated it because it's such a difficult medium. You know, like with acrylics, you can paint something. If you don't like it, you wait 15 minutes, you can paint over it and
Mm-hmm.
start again. With watercolor, it's, you know, especially once you get towards like the final details, if one little brushstroke that's off and causes a water spot or something because it's so malleable, you know,
Yeah,
even when it's even when it's dry, you can really mess it up. So
it's
it
finicky.
just makes it a really frustrating and difficult medium. I hated it for a long, long time. Like, absolutely hated using watercolors. Every time my teachers in school were like, "Hey, yeah, we're gonna do this in watercolors," like, damn it. Well, here's another F, you know. Um, but having time to sit down and practice and just play with it, you know, I just bring out pieces of paper and just start like flopping color down to see how it absorbed and how it ran if it was at an angle or, you know, just certain things I could do with it. And from there I was like, oh, okay, I kind of understand how this medium works now, you know. So I just kind of kept building it up. uh, and one thing for me is I really like saturated colors. You know, you can achieve that really easily with oils and acrylics, but it's patience with watercolor because you just have to build up layer upon layer upon layer in order to get that richness that you need. You know.
I do know, and that's also frustrating for me.
Yeah, it has definitely made me work on my patience for sure, you know, because so many times I just have to put things down and be like, all right, I have to let this dry completely before I come back.
Yep.
One of the things I learned really quick, especially when I started moving to these bigger pieces, I started using watercolor canvas instead of paper. And that's a whole new beast, because it doesn't absorb like paper does. And so I learned really quickly that if I let things dry completely in between, I can come back and add something on top, whether it be a shading color or a highlight or something like that. But I get one shot, and that's it. I have to put a brush stroke down and then let that dry before I go back in, because otherwise you pull color up and it just completely ruins what you're trying to do.
So pacing was a difficult task to learn.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not a very patient person. Like, if I have to stop doing something in general, like it gets stuck to the side and doesn't get returned to until a couple of months down the line sometimes. So making myself stop and take a moment and reflect on what I need to do next, the next steps, and just let everything completely set was probably one of the hardest things I had to learn.
But here you are on the other side of the lesson.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's still a struggle every day, to be honest. But I'm definitely able now to. I appreciate where the final result will get me, and I know that's where I particularly want to be for my pieces. So it's easier for me to say no. Don't just put down that brush and walk away from it for 24 hours. Just give yourself 24 hours.
Yeah. But that's contrast to me, because I'll sit down and like knock out a piece in 90 minutes to 4 hours and be like, all right, cool, and never have to stop. And then it's just done. And then, having to stop and let things dry in the middle of that process is not a normal part of my workflow.
Right. And honestly, I talking with other people, that seems to be the general way to go. I met a guy at the last event I worked. He was talking about his process, and he says he never lets the paint get dry, even his bottom layer. So once the paint starts drying, he's done. Like, man, I wish I could work like that. And his stuff was super abstract, but really cool. Lots of form and shape to it. And that's it's frustrating to me, because I know I have to let mine dry, otherwise I'm not going to get the look I want to achieve. So like, working fast is I can only work so fast. I guess is what that comes down to.
Well, I mean, that's just part of learning the new medium, the finesses of it, and where they lie in your practice of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And each medium has its own things. I talk to oil painters that are like, oh, once I finish a piece, it's got to sit for like 3 months before I can seal it. I'm like, what? I can't wait for that.
Yeah, anytime I think about oil painting, like that aspect of it is what cracks me up the most.
Yeah, man, oil paints are a lot of fun. I've used them a couple of times, and I just the feel of them is really cool. They have a really thick texture to them, and painting with them is a lot of fun. With with the touch of the brush on the canvas and stuff, but all the other chemicals and stuff you got to use, like it's work for sure.
Yeah, plus I don't think I have the patience in me at all to watch something dry for 3 months.
Yeah, man, me either. Actually, there's no way.
I don't even. I've got stuff laying up in the corner of my house that have been tucked behind other things laid up in the corner of my house for more than 3 months. I can't do that with an oil painting.
Yeah, I definitely have some canvases that, like, I started before I went to school, so like 2015, 2014. that are literally just sitting in the corner mocking me every time I see them. Like,
Oh,
ha ha, you'll never finish this one.
oh man, I walk down the hallway to my bedroom and there's like a stack of paintings that you can see from one end of the hallway, and I just turned that and walked down, and every time I'm just like, they stare me in the eyes and they're like, "We see you seeing us." And most of them are done, and some of them are really like, but I know there's some in that stack. They're just like, "Hey man, what's up?"
Right, right. I will say, man, that's been one of the hardest things for me working on my own in general. Not having a boss to report to say, hey, you need to get this done by this day. Like, setting your own time limits is great, but sometimes it can be a real bear, because you're like, oh, well, I'll just get back to that piece at some point, and then at some point never comes around.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be working on a commission right now that I have technically started, but have not technically finished.
Right.
Like supposed to be done by the end of the month. So we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, it's usually a little easier for me personally if I've got somebody, especially if it's somebody I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, like when friends commission me to do stuff, I'm like, yeah, I'll get to it, and they're super cool about, hey, no rush, get to it when you can. And then 6 months later, they're like, I was just curious about this piece. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get on it right now.
It's
so
75% done, sitting on my desk as we speak.
Right.
So what are you working with right now for the shows and such you're getting ready to do this summer?
You mean as far as materials or?
Yeah, mediums, context, style.
So I'm pretty much at this point down to watercolor originals and prints of those. So I pretty much get a scan of everything I do, even if it's something I'm not happy with. And then that way, once the original's gone, I always have the choice to either make paper prints or canvas prints.
Mm-hmm.
Which, that has been amazing to me, finding a place that is really inexpensive as far as the canvases are concerned, really good quality, and I don't have to stock a whole bunch because they drop ship to people when they order. So I don't have to have a ton sitting around. Like, I literally have thousands of paper prints sitting around because I got to order 50 to 100 at a time.
Right.
And so another thing that just adds up. Next thing you know, my closet that I used to store my mailing stuff in is now filled with paper prints. I'm like, damn it.
Yep.
So, but yeah, so the shows have been interesting for me. I've never, I've gone and shown at some music festivals, like helping a buddy out with his booth, and he gives me a small corner of the booth to work, to show my art during the festival and stuff. But lately I've been doing these art shows locally in Nashville. Some of them are juried and stuff, and I don't know, it's just a different crowd than I'm used to, and so it's been hit or miss whether or not my stuff actually goes over. I'm learning to definitely pick my audience.
Yeah, that's fair.
But so right now I'm really just heavily focused on the watercolor stuff, just trying to, push my skills further every time I do it, learn new techniques, and just make sure I get prints and scans of everything I do.
So what shows have you got coming up?
So tomorrow I'm actually doing the 100 Taylor Arts Market down in Germantown in downtown Nashville. It'll be my first time doing that one, so I'm pretty excited to see, what it's like. And then the only other one I have booked currently is in June. I'll be doing this awesome event here in town called the Punk Rock Flea Market, which is absolutely amazing. It totally opened my eyes to a whole new clientele, I guess, like I used to be a punk when I was a teenager and stuff, and that was my primary source of music. So getting back to something like that, and then having people really appreciate the weirdness of my art, I guess, was really something new for me. So I'm super excited about that one. Um, and then I'll also be helping out at a few other music festivals with my buddy. We're doing Bonnaroo, of course, which is 4 days of heat and
and
avoiding heat stroke.
yeah, trying to stay hydrated and in shade.
Yeah, yeah. And then we've got he'll probably be doing Halloween down in Florida in October. So there's a few bigger things lined up, and I'm always looking for smaller craft and art shows around town.
I don't mean to put you on the spot with this statement, but are you going to sign up for the Walls this summer?
Well,
Registration
unfortunately,
yesterday, I think.
yeah, I saw that, and man, this is like they always have the summer one on the weekend that. So we have this huge extended family camping trip. It's basically all the really good friends we've met. My wife and I have met throughout the years.
Oh no! So this is like the biggest conflict.
Yeah, yeah. And so every year it's literally right on that weekend. I'm like, damn it! Like I just can't. I can't get out of it because
right.
it's people expect to see you, and the kids are like, yeah, we gotta go. So it's the one every year I have to miss.
Well, that's that. At least you have good reason.
Yeah, well, it's definitely. I think about you guys while I'm out there camping for sure. Especially this year, like there's going to be that battle on Friday night, and that
dude,
sounds.
I saw that. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, that sounds like it's going to be really cool. So I'm glad to see that they're actually expanding. That place is. Man, that place is such a gem.
Oh, I know. And everybody I talk to has the same amount to say about it. Like it's just a treat and a treasure to be able to go there and do that.
Yeah, yeah. And I honestly, I wish it was closer so that I could get down there a bit easier, but that's definitely,
you tell me about it.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm so glad that place exists. Like, there's so many amazing artists that show up there that I'm just blown away every time I walk up there.
Oh, it's always a good time to be amongst like-minded people at that event.
Yeah, definitely.
So what weirdness are you working on right now? What's the current body of work look like, my friend?
Well, so I've been digging really heavy into my addiction to surrealism.
Go on.
So I just recently, fairly recently finished my first 18 by 24 and a 24 by 36. Hey. So the 18 by 24 is a visual pun called eye candy. It's a eyeball licking a lollipop that is also a Apple phone. And puns are like one of my favorite forms of humor ever. Mm-hmm. So they find themselves in my work a lot. And then so the biggest one I just did the 24 by 36 canvas, which I didn't expect to be so hard to cover that much space with watercolor, but it was really difficult. But it's an extreme close-up of an orangutan face, and it's actually a new series I'm starting on called the Human Suck series. So it's basically just going to be a bunch of close-ups of endangered animals' eyes
looking really
glaring
sad.
At you. Yeah, looking really sad and forlorn, and hidden in the canvas somewhere in the texture of the animal is written "Human Suck."
I'm here for that. I've seen the orangutan one, and I do really enjoy it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's that was one of those ones that I was like, do I really want to put this out there? Are people gonna appreciate this, or are they gonna be like, no, humans don't suck?
But that one will make you think about the reactions.
But it's been weird. Like, people I would not expect to like it are just like, this is amazing. The older lady at the place where I have it scanned, Chromatics in town, she was just like, I love this piece. I'm like, really? All right then. So that's been really fun. I've got several others planned for that. And then the biggest one currently on the easel is another eye pun that I'm currently calling Eye Scream, which is basically a couple of eyes that look like scoops of ice cream on a cone screaming.
I love it.
So
I'm here for it. What about the fellow with the disco ball for a head? Is that what that is?
Yeah, actually just finished that one up, and that some of these 6x9s that I do, the smaller ones are really just studies for me for bigger pieces I want to do, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so that one's been developing in the head for a long time, and finally like got that one done and out. I actually literally just put the spray varnish on it this morning to call it done, you know.
Nice.
So yeah, it's called Blue Monday. It's a guy in a suit standing at the bus stop getting ready to go to work with a disco ball head, just like all sad and thinking about the weekend that he had, you know?
Yeah, I get that. So in that statement, you said something I want to expand on. You said that one been bounced around in your head for a while. Like, what's your thought process before you bring pieces to paper?
Man, I overthink things all the time. So definitely when an image first appears to me, I know a lot of visual artists when they're talking to people, or people who are just visual in general, when they're talking to people, pictures form in your head. You know, it's almost like you're seeing icons or hieroglyphs while you're talking to somebody. And a lot of times it's just these little like quirky sayings or throwaway jokes that stick in my head, and I'm like, man, that's a great image. So if I really like them, I know I like them actually, because they stick around for 3 or 4 days and won't leave me alone. And I'm waking up in the middle of the night like, oh yeah, I remember that thing that guy said, and that made me think of this, you know. So they definitely bounce around in my head for a while. I like to sketch things out because I really like odd perspectives. So it takes me a while to, especially if there's a human form in it, which I absolutely suck at. I like to sketch them out and find that right point of view, you know, whether it's looking up at a drastic angle or looking down or just not straight on. So in that sketching process, that's when I work all of that stuff out. And once I feel I've got that proper perspective, then I move to my either the paper or the canvas and start going from there. Some of the bigger pieces I tend to sketch out, scan, and then blow up, you know, so that I don't have to draw it multiple times. And then I can trace it straight on the canvas or the paper from there.
So that's a good workflow. Seems to be beneficial for you.
Absolutely. So it was actually one of the most important things I learned when I went back to school. You know, they were all about like process. And so while I was there, I'm going through like, you know, I remember one assignment we had 50 thumbnail sketches, which were like 2x4. And basically you just want to like put down shapes and form to kind of show what your story is, you know, and then you pick from that. And then you go to your grayscale sketches, which is where you put all your shadow and highlight and stuff in. And then you move to your coloring. And it's like, it's definitely a long process. And I have edited some things out to make it more beneficial for me personally. But I think process is important, you know, having standard things you do all the time to develop a piece is just, it's nice because you don't have to think about the next step. You just go and do it.
Right. It's the process that is familiar and comfortable at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a lot like muscle memory type stuff, you know, like if we had to think to breathe, a lot of people would be in trouble, I think. So
I'll be inclined to agree with you on that. So what?
So yeah, Go ahead.
What kind of things find their way into your head other than puns? Because I know your imagery isn't always the most dense filled with puns.
Right. Well, no, puns are definitely like the thing that amuse me the most. But outside of that, my inspirations basically uh, so societal stuff, societal issues, just general thoughts. Like the guy with the disco ball head, the Blue Monday. Like I remember going to work on a Monday morning and just being like, man, it was such a good weekend. Like, I really don't want to get back to this now, And so those kind of things, just those daily experiences that we have all the time, tend to find my way into their work a lot. The eye candy one is essentially my sarcastic way of poking fun at the marketing world, Like we see all these images that are just like, man, I really noticed it when I had kids, and they first started seeing commercials and they started immediately like asking things like, oh, I want that. Damn, this marketing stuff really works,
Mm-hmm.
And it's so frustrating. I hate the whole marketing world, especially after learning about it,
Yes.
So there tends to be a lot of societal sarcasm in my stuff. And then honestly, the biggest thing, the thing that has been there my entire life, is music, like all sorts of music, anything from, well, I don't listen to modern country and I don't listen to a whole lot of opera. Other than that, everything's fair game.
I think that's a fair bit. That's a large catalog to draw inspiration from.
Yeah, it definitely is. Favorites, I guess, would be, I'm a big Deadhead, love Tool, love Primus, I love Tom Waits, like one of my favorite songwriters ever. And then, just I was a musician in a band for a long time, in a symphonic band for a long time, so I still listen to a lot of classical stuff as well.
Side note, did you know Les Claypool is about to be touring and playing Rush?
Yeah, I missed him. He just came through Nashville and I wasn't able to go because I had other plans. But yeah, this is their second tour doing that now. And from what I understand, it's pretty badass.
Yeah, I want to see it too.
That was like one of his biggest inspirations as a kid.
And it's understandable why.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm not like a massive Rush fan. I'm not generally going to sit down and listen to a day of Rush, but I absolutely respect and love what they did. So different and it's so damn technical. It just blows my mind.
It blew most people's minds from many angles, and honestly, a little bit of mine too. So I can't disagree with that at all. But inspiration wise, now that we've used that word, what or who are some of yours other artists? Not so much themes of society and such.
Well, so Dolly is definitely like my top artist of all time. When I was 5 years old, my parents took me to a Dolly exhibit down in Fort Lauderdale, and I remember seeing a hallucinogenic Toreador, like life size, and
that's cool.
Man, it's so big and it's so vibrant, especially when you're so tiny, and I was just like, I was blown away. So from that moment on, Dolly has been an influence on everything I did, even when I was designing sets for theater and stuff. Like that surrealism crept in there all the time.
When were you doing that? You didn't even ever talk to me about that. What?
Yeah,
when
so
did you do that?
I actually moved to Nashville because I was working in theater. I came here to work at Nashville Children's Theater.
And you're just going to gloss over that and not not bring up how cool that is.
Well, yeah, honestly, it was one of my, I did it for over 20 years, 25 years almost. And so, yeah, that was like my first career. I started out as an actor. The first time I went to college was actually as a musical theater major. Spent hours upon hours singing and learning things that I never expected to learn, like ballet and jazz dance, Um, and then, so I worked for a while as an actor. Then I decided I can eat more consistently if I become a technician and help build things. Um,
That's an excellent bit of logic you have there.
yeah, right. Well, and at the time I was still like, well, I'm still going to try and be an actor. And then, the tech jobs just kind of started pouring in. And next thing I know, I'm getting hired to be a props master at a outdoor drama for the summer. And then I came to Nashville as an assistant tech and loved the place I worked. Nashville Children's Theater was man, when I was working there, they were one of the top 5 children's theaters in the country. So to say it was an amazing job, and every set was different. It's for kids, so it's super fantastical. Again, that surrealism thing really helped me out there.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. And then eventually, after working my way up the ladder there, I became a scenic designer and the technical director there. And then spent the last 6 or so years up at MTSU teaching kids how to build things and a little bit of scenic design and stuff like that. And that's actually what vaulted me into the art realm. I started combining my love of woodwork with my love of painting or drawing, and started wood burning things. And one thing led to the other, and started picking up pencil and pen and stuff like that.
And so now you're here.
Say again?
And so now you're here.
So now I'm here after a full career in theater. Part of the thing with theater is it's a lot of night work, and my wife and I had a kid, and she was transitioning from theater into library sciences, and so I was like, well, I can't. It's really hard to continue working 2 to 3 jobs at a time and try and be here to take care of the kid while she's going to school. And so that was pretty much what prompted me to find something else, and instead of just going somewhere else, I was like, well, I think I'm just going to go to work for myself.
Yeah. The freedom of the schedule and or lack thereof, I guess, was the attractive part.
Yeah. I mean, that was a big thing, but just being able to be around for my family. I'm a homebody, I love being at home with them, hanging out, playing video games with the kid, even though I'm not a video game guy. He loves it. So, that kind of stuff is fun to me. And now I'm able to actually sit around and enjoy them, instead of coming home at 5 o'clock every day, seeing them for a few hours before they go to bed and taking them to school the next day,
Right.
So
yeah.
that was pretty much one of the biggest deciding factor right there was like, I want to be present in my kid's life as much as they will allow me.
Yeah, fair. Definitely fair. I can't say that's a bad way to go about it at all.
Well, I wonder sometimes if they wish I would just get the hell out of the house,
Dad, can you go paint somewhere else?
I think they're just as happy as about my new studio as I am, because they're like, well, thank God Dad won't be in the kitchen all the time.
That's great. It's like, yeah, he's just over there in the corner doing his thing.
Yeah, doing his thing.
There.
And, they know when I want to ignore them, because I'll like put my sound reduction headphones on and like try and block everything out. And of course, that's the time that they're always like tapping me on the elbow, like, can I have a Pop-Tart? I'm like, God damn it, they're right there, little kid. Just go get it.
Go get the damn Pop-Tart. Yeah, that's fair. I know that feeling too. Just a hair. My son's 6, and I'll be working on something. He'll just like sneak down the hallway and look around the corner, and I'm like, "Yeah, how'd you know I was there?" Like, you're not as quiet as you think you are.
Right. Not to mention, like, you feel that presence, when you feel like somebody's like looking over your shoulder at what you're doing, but you're not quite sure that they're there. You can just feel them. And
Mm-hmm.
kids are really bad about that because they come into the room with specific intentions. And so you can literally palpably feel that as they enter the room, just like, oh God, here it comes.
Right. Yeah, there's something about it, when they're around.
Definitely.
Kids. Um, so what is beyond this body of work? Are there thoughts for beyond this body of work?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things I've been really pushing for since I went, into whatever it was on my own was like I really want to find a way to give back. So I'm really pushing towards, like, with that Human Suck series. I'm really pushing towards things like I would love to be able to do pieces about climate change, habitat loss, just the general natural disaster that we're starting to see happening around us, and be able to sell some pieces that I can actually give to conservation efforts. One of the things I plan on doing, like with that orangutan piece, is giving to orangutan conservation, and I don't really know how else to give back to my community other than helping with habitat. I have that skill, but I I just want to give more. So I'm hoping to be able to develop things in the future that I can find a way to give back, not just to worldwide things, but locally as well. And that's always been one of my big pushes. Is like I want to use what I can do to help give back to things.
Yeah, you can close the loop on that whole thought process more or less, because
Yeah,
the idea is generated and then you give the generated content back to the idea. It's a pretty
yeah,
romantic
definitely.
way to go
Well,
about it.
and one of the things, like, I, man, I'm sure you have this issue too. Like, as an artist, there's a lot of waste.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's recyclable paper a lot of times, but it's still just waste. So, like, one of the things I've been doing is keeping all my scraps for years. And I just started making plywood paper. So it's basically layers of paper wood glued together and then pressed to make like a stick of lumber.
Yeah.
Um, just just little things. Any way I can help uh, reduce my trash or reduce my footprint, and then use that in order to give back to things financially, like I'm not able to do currently.
Right. And I know some folks that have painted, images that pertain to a certain context or cause, and then gift them to organizations to be
Yeah,
auctioned for whatever reason. And
yeah,
that seems to be a popular way. I've seen other artists go about that kind of idea.
absolutely. Like, I'd love to be able to. One of my favorite artists, NC Winters, does a lot of poster stuff, but uh, kind of dark, macabre looking stuff, but still bright. He did a poster with a ocean conservation group, um, and I think they sold like 250 of them or something like that at like $175 a piece.
Yeah.
And all of that money went to ocean conservation and ocean cleanup, and that kind of stuff. Like, that's what I want to get to. I'd love to be able. I don't want to be famous necessarily, but I would love to get name recognition enough that people are willing to partner with me for things like that.
Yeah, that that would be a lot of fun. Just knowing that your efforts will be received by that kind of effort would be great.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not a lot, but it's something that, one, makes me feel better. I know I'm doing something good, and I can use the thing I love to help out, and that's super cool.
Yeah, that's the warm and fuzzy part. You're not sitting around with this beautiful piece of whatever it is, just like, what do I do with this now?
Yeah, that's man, I'm definitely hoping for that day because, like I said, things are definitely starting to pile up, which is great because that means my body of work is getting bigger.
Right. I always judge that by how many paintings I have leaned up in the corners of the house.
Absolutely,
Like, they're not
absolutely.
stacked on my desk. They're leaned up in the corner in the hallway, like in the living room. Some of them are in my bedroom. Like, how many piles of things do I have laying around the house that I'm just done with?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, like you said, my walls are full of other people's work,
Right.
so I don't have room to put all the things that I create on a regular basis. There's just literally not enough room in my house.
Right.
And
Yeah,
besides, I'd rather look at everybody else's work anyway.
I absolutely. I realized about 5 or 6 years ago, I was like, man, I love the gallery in my house, but I have kept one piece that I've done that's up. Actually, two. The other one was a picture of my daughter that she has hanging up in her room. Um, but I have one piece that I have kept for me personally that is now framed and up in my house, and it's like in the corner, so I don't pay a whole lot of attention to it. But after, like I said, sometimes after like 85 plus hours of working on a piece and doing details, which yeah, I actually do spend that amount of time, going through pieces sometimes. I don't, after that much time, I don't necessarily want to look at it personally,
Oh yeah,
like,
that close ever again.
yeah, like it's totally embedded in my head. I remember the process, I remember the frustrations, and I'm good with it, time to get it out.
Mm-hmm. And put it on a wall somewhere away
Yeah,
from my
yeah,
eyes.
let somebody else enjoy it.
Yeah. I feel the same way. There might be one or two of my pieces I have legitimately displayed in my home that are mine. So
Right.
The ones that I'm either like too attached to and don't want to sell, or just too proud of, I want to look at it for maybe just a couple more weeks.
Yeah, that's it exactly. And I get why people are like, oh, these. I hear a lot of people say these are like my babies. Like I have birthed this thing, and it's really hard for me to let it go. And I understand that feeling, but I don't possess it.
It's honestly, I kind of have the opposite feeling sometimes. Like, this piece is done with my ass,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and if I touch it again, it's just going to destroy itself somehow. So
yeah, absolutely.
I, I I have found that I have, or I've been trying to practice being able to better recognize the point of diminishing returns.
Yes.
And it's one of those scenarios like, I really like where this is at right now. This is really cool as it sits. But what if I do this? And the space between I like this and then the but what if is the moment where I just need to step back and be like, all right, now for real, like, how full of shit am I going to be today? And
Right.
and I have to just let the piece like stare at me for a minute and be like, man, I think I'm done. And then I'm just like begrudgingly nod my head and be like, yeah, I guess you are.
Well, especially if you're into the details at all, like I will obsess over small details that I'm fairly certain most people never see, unless I point it out. But those things are important to me in order to finish a piece. And so, like, especially if you get involved in a particular spot and you're like, no, I got to work this out. And then you step back and you're like, oh, well, all right, that was probably a little too much because you can't even read it from 10 feet away,
Right. Uh, I have a problem in some of my more geometric works of finding the balance of negative space. Like, how much space do I leave in this area to complement the pattern I'm trying to make? And sometimes you just go way too hard and kill a lot of the negative space, and then you're just like, well, shit, what have I done?
Right. Well, I mean, that's one of those things too that I think the more you do specific style, the more you learn about yourself personally, like
Yeah.
where you want to draw that line. And especially when when you're just starting out and young, you're thinking, oh, well, I got to pack as many details as I can into this. And that's not always necessary. Sometimes it's like that open space tells most of the story.
Yeah, and I've had the geometric pinstripey mandala stuff. I've been doing that for a couple of years, so I've found a pretty good balance of how I like to have those come out. But every now and again, I'll just be in the flow and I'll forget to stop.
Right. Well,
So,
I really like the way your pieces, particularly, like some of them, you tend to leave a lot of negative space, and it really makes not just the colors pop, but it makes the places where you actually put detail really stand out. You know, so you can actually get in there and study them, and that's one of the things I've always really appreciated about your work.
well, thank you. I try to make good use of what negative space I can remember to leave. Because, man, sometimes, I mean, you know what it's like. You'll just be in your headspace and doing the damn thing, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden you'll look up and the canvas is full, and you're just like, what happened? It's 1 o'clock. And you know, the
Yeah.
day is gone and you have a headache and you need to go eat something. Like,
Right. Yeah. That flow state can really, like, it's like meditation. Like time just seems to like stand still or something.
and that specific thing is honestly what I find most pleasing about that particular workflow. So I like to poke at people and see where they find that in theirs.
Right.
That's honestly one of the biggest reasons I ask that question, is because I find it in my workflow, and I hope for everyone's betterment that they find it in theirs.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
it's definitely
definitely.
fun.
Yeah. Especially like, for me, obsessing over those tiny little details. And I like to use a lot of lines as texture, just to break up color a little bit. And so, like, sometimes doing those, sometimes it's just like a shade or two darker than the actual color down. So, like,
But that's
you
enough.
got to be up you got to be up real close to it, and you got to really watch where you're putting your paintbrush, because when you step back you can see it, or when you get really close, and I'll spend hours just painting these little texture lines, and next thing you know, like you said, like I've got a headache and I've got to step away, and I'm like, oh man, I really need to eat something now.
You're right, and that's what gets me most of the time. Because if it's I'll say this and then ask you the question that I need to ask right now. I'll wake
Okay.
up in the morning and I'll be like, yeah, it's time to get to work. Like it's a Saturday or a Friday, and I'm just like, all right, I have time to be creative and exercise myself in this way. And I'll sit down at my desk and I'll do the thing, and I'll be up at like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. And I'll all of a sudden look at my phone and realize that I'm hungry and I have a headache and I'm really thirsty, and
Yeah.
it's 2 p.m.
Yeah,
And I
definitely.
haven't eaten or drank anything all day since I woke up. I just sat down at my desk and picked up a brush or
Yeah.
a pencil or whatever. And I'm just like, God,
Yeah.
I hate when I do this, but look what I made. It's amazing.
Right.
It's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a human. I need to go like take care of this thing called a body
You
that
got
I
to
have.
definitely got to recharge, man. Eventually, even just sitting down, like it definitely just takes a toll on you eventually.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. So that statement leads me to the question I really like to ask people. What does a good creative day look like for you?
uh, well, I definitely like, I have certain rituals that I do in the morning outside of, family stuff. But like the first thing I tend to do every morning is sit down with a fresh cup of coffee and sit by my giant window in my living room, and I've got a bunch of plants there, and I just kind of sit for 30 minutes in total silence. No kids, no wife, no TV, no music, no nothing, just sit and kind of gather myself. And that's always the first step for me creating, like just kind of pushing everything else to the side, trying to prepare myself mentally to focus on a piece. Um, and then once that's done, man, just being able to really like dig into a piece, having like 4 to 6 hours throughout the day where I don't have to make a phone call or don't have to answer a text or don't have to do anything, other than listen to music and just paint or draw or print something. Having large blocks of time to work on things is probably my biggest issue, working from home ever.
Right.
Um, so when I get those days, like that's my perfect day. Like I can sit down and eventually get myself into that flow state on a fairly regular basis. Honestly, like I'm pretty adept at doing that, only because at school I'd have 4 hour blocks, and that was pretty much like work, 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 work all
Yeah.
the time. Um, so yeah, just having those huge blocks, and then being able to step away from it, not have to stare at it all night long. Which is a lot of times if I'm in the middle of a piece and I have to stop working because I got to go do life things, I'll actually take that piece and put it down in the basement just so I don't have to see it, and then
Yeah.
I don't have to constantly think about it until the next day.
That's understandable. If you physically remove it, there's not a trigger to think about it.
Yeah, yeah. It just makes it easier to separate yourself. It's one of the things I learned working from home is like it's really important to be able to separate that personal life and that business life, or even that creative life. Like even if it's not a business, just being able to separate those two so you're not thinking about one while you're involved in the other.
Yeah,
Um,
and without a dedicated separate space, if all that lives in the same physical space, it's harder to do that.
yeah, absolutely. But that's where those huge blocks of time come in handy too, because you, most people, I will say, I think can ignore things long enough to be able to put together, even if it's like 2 to 3 hours. You'd be amazed how much you can get done in 2 to 3 hours if there are no other interruptions.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But yeah, and honestly, like I what to create as a perfect day, like man, anything with details. Like once I get to that point where all my base color is down and I've got my forms and everything else, and it's time to really start putting in those, break out the like zero brush and put those really tiny lines in there and all the shading and stuff. That's what I really dig into.
So you just get lost in the sauce.
Say again.
You get lost in the sauce.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I mean, to me, that's the piece where that's the time when the piece really starts to come alive. Like you put your foundation down. You have everything nice and solid. Now it's time to really pop those things and make those. I don't know, maybe make those messages that you want to put in there. I guess that's really the wrong word because it's not really messages, but just clarifying those details that you want people to focus on so that their eye flows through the piece. That's the stuff that really gets my rocks off, I guess.
So then that I'm glad you said that. So is that the part of the piece where it's less feel and more thought and planned, or is that a process that is a little mix of both when it comes to that stage of the piece?
Oh, it's definitely a mix of both. Like, especially with watercolor, because I talked about like all the layers, and I being using such opaque colors on watercolor, like I'll sometimes put the same color down in a spot 4 or 5 times before I'm like, yes, that's the shade I'm looking for. And as I'm doing that, I don't know, you can see those layers popping through, especially in the light. So like things come up as you're working, like, oh, I didn't realize that's really cool looking. Like, I want to emphasize this as a wrinkle, or, you just find things that you're like, oh, that works perfectly. Like, I'm going to emphasize this because that'll help this. So it's definitely a mix of the two. Um, but because of my process, there's a lot of planning beforehand. Like I know specific areas that I want to highlight because I want the viewer to read it like they would a book. I don't want them necessarily to just jump all over it. Like I want to try and guide their eye through the piece to help tell the story.
that's a thought process I don't normally have to employ, because I normally don't have any narrative efforts into my pieces. So I applaud you on that one, because when you said that, I was just like, damn, yeah, he's right. I don't ever have to do that.
Well, and so I will say that's a lot of that graphic design influence that I got at school, because, well, and not just the graphic design, but the commercial illustration stuff too. Like,
Right.
when you're illustrating things for like a poster or a show for a band or something, there you want it to tell a story, no matter how dramatic or serious or whatever. You should be able to look at that piece and say, oh, I get this, or figure out eventually, and it may not be what the artist chose it to mean, but that doesn't really matter as long as it means something to you. That's the important part.
Right.
And so there's a lot of like, okay, so the story I'm trying to tell is this. How do I set that up in order to tell that story the best? What angle is the best? What is this dark? Is it bright? Like all of those things I pre-plan before I actually sit down and start on the piece.
So you found your way into a workflow that has a really good mix of logic and feel.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great way to put it, actually. Yeah, working in theater was part of that that marriage.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see why.
Well, and you go from designing a set where you're like trying to think of this fantastical thing and like, how do I do this without just building a house on stage,
Right. You have
and
to
then
whittle these ideas down into the most practical ways they can be used to create
right.
the goal that they're for.
Absolutely. And then on the other end, while you're designing, because you're building it, you're thinking, okay, can I make this actually happen like it needs to? Like, can I build this physically to use like I need to? And so there's this serious balance between the two, because if it gets too heavy on either side, things can be a real challenge.
Yeah, I see the parallels in those two environments for sure. That's a great place to pick that up, because where else would be more fun to pick that up than in theater?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot like creating art. Every day when you go to work at a theater, you can pretty much expect something different. You never know what you're going to be building or working on. Or I remember spending 2 days deforming styrofoam, this giant styrofoam cross. We were taking acetone and just sprinkling it on it so that the acetone would eat away the styrofoam and make it look like stone. And so 2 days I spent doing that. And then the day after, I'm building bricks. I'm like,
and I'm glad you had that. I enjoy that aspect of randomness in my current place of employment, and honestly, that's been a thing I've enjoyed at a lot of jobs that I've had. So,
right,
I'm happy that you also have that and carry that into your creative process when necessary.
Yeah, it's definitely like one part of the foundation.
Yeah, and bless the theater for being a loving home for all the creative misfits that we are.
Yeah, well, as much as I don't want to do theater anymore, I thank it for everything it gave to me. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It just gave me so much that I'm able to draw on now. Haha, draw, get it? But it really has. Like, it's given me so many things that I'm able to be like, oh, I remember, and just being able to take those skills and put it into what I'm doing now has helped me out so much, and I don't even think about it. It just happens.
Yeah. So I've had you here for a little over an hour now. I've got one more question for you.
Okay.
And this question may or may not put you on the spot, so if you don't have a good answer for it at this moment, don't feel like you can't text me later and be like, hey, yeah, this is the thing. So
all right.
Who would you like to see in your seat? Like, who would you like to listen to on the podcast? You can give me one name. You can give me 3 names, no names, whatever you're comfortable with.
Oh, Man, I'm gonna have to give a shout out to a couple of my friends here. My good buddy Sam Burge. He does. He's the one who owns the tie dye company that I help with at music festivals. But he's also an amazing portrait painter. Just did this really cool piece of Maynard. All tooled up and stuff.
Right.
So definitely, I'd love to hear what he has to say about things. And then a good buddy of mine, his name is Angel Rivera. He works under Sage Art Designs, but he's a VJ, like 3D visuals for DJs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, I've been a huge fan of his work for a long time. It's so different, and the fact that he's able to create these spaces, that he then projects to music just kind of blows me away.
Yeah, that's honestly a topic I have a lot of interest in, so I may have to get a hold of that guy.
Yeah, definitely. I'll send you a link to his page and stuff, and you can friend him. And excuse me. I'll definitely send you a link to both of their stuff so you can check out their work.
Excellent. I would appreciate that. So one last thing, plug your socials, tell people where they can find you and your work and all that jazz.
Yeah, sweet. So on Instagram and Facebook, you can pretty much just check Heady Hardware. Instagram is Heady_hardware, and that is spelled HEADDY hardware. And then I have a Twitter account, but I don't really post on there a whole lot. You can also check out my online store at headyhardware.org. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, Sean, it was a treat to hear your voice today, man. It was good to catch up to you. I genuinely enjoyed this conversation, and I'm happy that you are busy with things you are happy to be busy about. Go kick ass and take some names at them shows you got coming up.
Awesome, man. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to sit and chat with you about art. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, we never get enough time at the art park to like have a legit conversation.
Yeah. Everybody's so busy trying to do a mural in 2 days,
Oh yeah, but it's a good thing.
Absolutely. Thanks again for the opportunity, man. I really appreciate it.
All right, man. You have a good day. I'm gonna talk us out of here.
All right, you too. Bye.
All right, everybody. That was Sean. He's awesome. You should go check out his stuff. I greatly enjoy his work, and he is a cool dude that I enjoy hanging out with. So go check him out. If you wish to support the podcast, you can listen on Anchor or Spotify or Google Podcast, etc., etc., etc. You can share the podcast with all of your friends, creatively minded or not. Everybody deserves some good listening, and I think that's what I make here, at least on occasion. If you would like to support the person that makes the podcast, you can buy my art from me directly or via my website, ttwart.com. I am The Twisted Wrist on Instagram with periods between the and twisted and wrist. I have plenty of things and art shows coming up. I'm trying to save some pieces for the 2 art shows I have coming up. So if y'all want to see my work in public, July and August, you will be able to see my work in public, and you'll be able to talk to me about my art and all the things. I have a lot going on for those 2 months. I hope to see y'all at my art shows. I'm super excited about them. This has been the newest episode of the KAANP. That's the Knoxville Area Artist Networking Platform. We have a Discord. If you haven't listened or haven't heard me talk about the Discord, you can find the link on the link tree on the Instagram page for the KAANP. That's KAANP Podcast on Instagram. La-da-da. Thank you for listening. I hope y'all have a great day. I've enjoyed recording. Please share it. Please listen. All that jazz. Y'all are wonderful. I love you. Thank you.